Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. It is a Pewter post-game show following the preseason finale, where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defeated the Baltimore Ravens by a score of 26-20. With the starters getting some action early in the game and actually looking pretty good. We'll get into all of that, but obviously the big news of the evening was not, once again, anything that happened on the field. It was what was going on off of it, as Jason Licht had announced on the WFLA broadcast with Rondé Barber and Chris Myers that Bucs center Ryan Jensen is being placed on IR and will be out for the remainder of the season. So a tough blow there for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're going to break it all down. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is Adam Slavon of PewterReport.com. Scott Reynolds will be joining us in a little bit as well, live from Raymond James Stadium. He's got a couple things to do. He was in the locker room. He's at the press conference with Todd Bowles and Ryan Jensen. Jensen did speak, so we'll hear from Scott Reynolds about that too. We watch it as well. And so Scott will be on here in a bit. But Adam, your initial reaction to the news of Ryan Jensen being done for the year before he could even really get things started.
Yeah, it's a tough blow for the Bucs and the offensive line, seeing that Ryan Jensen's out for the year. And as Jensen said, it broke his heart, and I'm sure it breaks the Bucs' heart knowing that he's not going to be on the field this season. And just kind of my initial reaction to that is it leaves the offensive line even thinner than before. Now, when you look at the center position, you have Robert Hainsey, who played last year as a starter and was average, I would say. Didn't like the world on fire and wasn't awful, but somewhere in between. But beyond him, if he were to go down, as he did late in the season, who would be the center? Nick Leverett, who maybe profiles more as a guard. They have John Molchin is still in the picture, undrafted free agent Chris Murray. But besides those two, there isn't a lot of depth there and on the offensive line in general. So I wonder if a move will be made to kind of counteract that.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point with the depth at center after Ryan Jensen, because I'll be fully honest. I mean, we tapped into sources and no one was saying anything about Ryan Jensen. So I was fully operating under the fact that Jensen was not going to play at all this season. As Wayne says in this comment, never expected Jensen to play. Neither did I. I was just fully operating under Jensen's out, and if he's able to return beginning of the year, middle, or even at the end, then that's awesome. That's a huge boost for the
bonus,
Bucs.
Yeah,
exactly. It's a Bucs bonus, no pun intended. As Diesel Riche says, first time I've caught a live chat in a while. Go PR. Go Bucs. Yeah, we appreciate, obviously the news sucks about Ryan Jensen. We're not going to sugarcoat that, but we do appreciate everybody watching the show this evening. We can kind of all bond together over everyone being upset about Ryan Jensen being unavailable for the season. But the depth thing is the biggest thing for me, because when Jason Licht said the news of Ryan's going to be on IR, he's out for the rest of the season, I kind of took it as a formality at this point. Yeah. I very much kind of like, oh, all right, well, duh. That was kind of to be expected. And I feel pretty good about Robert Hainsey. I mean, obviously the big thing you lose with Jensen is the tenacity, the intensity, bringing like an attitude to this defense. That's really
playing alongside Cody Mock.
That would
have been fun to see, But
that unfortunately is another side story that we won't get to see this season. But that depth, man, is a scary one for real, because Molchin, I think, is probably the best candidate after Robert Hainsey, which is crazy to say. I think Nick Leverett's the best offensive lineman out of the people that you mentioned, with Chris Murray as well. But Leverett just didn't look comfortable as a center.
In the last preseason game,
go ahead.
First 2 reps, he got blown by and pushed back, and Keyshawn Vaughn, I think, had a loss of 4 yards. He got more comfortable as the game went along, but do you want to trust him if something were to happen to Hainsey now? It brings a lot of questions.
Sean Tyler says, if not for Wirfs and Jensen injuries, I fully believe we would have repeated. I guess going back to the 2021 season, I think if Antonio Brown didn't leave either, that would have changed a lot. Jensen didn't get hurt in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. It was obviously last season when he got injured. But yeah, I mean, Leverett struggled at center. Murray didn't even play tonight. He was a game day inactive. So, how much of a factor can he really be if he didn't even play in the last preseason game? So I don't know. We'll see how the Bucs attack this. Really, obviously roster cuts are coming up now. John Molson, I think, may have found himself a spot on the roster now because of the Ryan Jensen move. Because at first we were just talking about how, oh, well, maybe they'll keep Jensen on the team and then put him on IR. So someone they'll have to like kind of bring back on the team after letting go. And Molson kind of seemed like a good candidate for him. But
yeah,
Adam, this offensive line in general, we'll talk about the starters and how the main guys looked on offense. But the offensive line, the backups and everything, to your point, at times it looked like a turnstile throughout this preseason. They were much, much better today. But I'd be concerned about that depth of the offensive line. And that's going in hoping that a rookie at right guard excels and a right tackle that struggled at guard last season picks his game up. There's a lot of questions with this offensive line.
Yeah, and while you mentioned that Jensen's move to the injured reserve was more of a formality after not seeing him for the past week, it's even more question marks along the offensive line because you also have Matt Filer at left guard. You don't know what you're going to get out of him. And then Tristan Wirfs at left tackle. So every single position, there's a question mark. And heading into week one, going up against the Vikings, who have a good pass rush led by Daniel Hunter, it's going to be really interesting to see how they fare. And then looking at the backups along the offensive line, Brandon Walton, the game against the Jets, he struggled. Justin School, maybe those two are like the next in line at the swing tackle position. But there's definitely a lot of question marks with the offensive line. And another question mark is, will Ryan Jensen ever play in the NFL again?
Yeah, I think that's actually a huge question. Jensen spoke to the media after and had some interesting things to say. He kept talking about how it's really just the cartilage in his knee that is the biggest problem. He said the ligaments are fine, like on the x-ray and everything. It's just the cartilage that hasn't necessarily panned out. He kept saying something with a compartment, something with the compartment in his knee, the cartilage was not working out for him. And that's why he's, hasn't been able to come back and play and everything like that. And he said he's going to fight his butt off to return for next season. It
but
sucks.
How much more fight can he put in than what he did this offseason?
Exactly. There's not much that he can really do with it. And he even said surgery would make it worse. So, yeah. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I don't want to speculate too much, but there is a chance, as Gary says, we owe Jensen money this year and next year. They can't just cut Jensen with an injury settlement because they do owe him a lot of money. And there's obviously doing the whole Tom Brady credit card thing right now. I don't think they want to jump right back into that pool with a Ryan Jensen credit card, but there's nothing you can do with injury, but they're paying him a lot of money for essentially what was the the playoff game last season, which he struggled with a lot. Adam, I hate to say it, but like there is a legitimate chance that Ryan Jensen never plays center again in the NFL.
Yeah, that's a sad statement that Big Red may not see the field again. And it's just a really unfortunate blow for Jensen after spending all of last season kind of like slowly recovering, playing in the playoff game. There was hope that he was heading into this offseason, getting healthier. And then Todd Bowles said after the game, once he actually started working, that's when it got worse. When you started to see the swelling and the cartilage damage come into play. And it just really unfortunate. And it's kind of like a what if. What if he would have opted for the surgery instead of like taking different opinions from doctors and going that route? And it's really unfortunate. That's all I can really say about it.
Yeah, pretty much. And Scott Reynolds is going to join us in a little bit for anyone that's just tuning into the show. Scott will be joining us live from Raymond James Stadium at some point during the show. Could be in 5 minutes, could be halfway through it. So we'll talk more about Jensen when Scott gets back on the show. We do have video of Todd Bowles talking about the injury. Was there a setback? When did they come to this decision? So this is Todd Bowles talking specifically right after the game about putting Ryan Jensen on IR and effectively ending his season.
Evening, guys.
There you go, Todd.
Congrats on the win, but Ryan Jensen going to injured reserve is kind of the bigger news tonight. Can you just talk about that? And when was that decision made? We've asked you several times about his status, and you said status quo.
And it was status quo. We did everything we can to get him ready. He did everything he could to get ready. Wasn't responding. And at this point in time, under further evaluation from the doctors, we decided to put him on IR. So.
Some kind of setback?
Well, the more he did on it, the worse it got. So, when you're healed, when you don't do anything, you're not healed once you start working on it and it's not responding. That was just made the last day or so.
Yeah, so, obviously Jensen hadn't been practicing for a little while. I think Bowles makes a fair statement about, well, yeah, like you can be healthy just moving around and everything, but when you start actually like playing and putting stress on that knee, that kind of changes things. And I think that's kind of what we saw. And they obviously were very, very slow with bringing Jensen along. He would practice, then he wouldn't do team stuff. The most physical thing he did was the one-on-one blocking. And I'm curious how much that affected his knee. But outside of that, Todd Bowles didn't really comment much about it. Jensen we'll get to in a little bit when Scott Reynolds joins the show. We got a lot of comments as well about what went on tonight. Obviously, the Bucs did play tonight. They won 26-20. Brian Gomez with TGHT says, was at a B-Day party and missed the whole game. How'd the first team look and who shined? Yeah, let's get into the beginning of this game, especially the first half, because I think the second half really, Adam, was dominated by the unfortunate Ryan Jensen news. But, starting out with this offense, not ideal. They went 3 and out early on. 2 short passes by Baker Mayfield, both completed. Baker completed every single pass that he threw in tonight's game, which was a good sight to see. But that first drive, no one was open. He went with someone underneath. A nice run on the play. The defense started out very slow. And let's remember, the Ravens the Ravens did not play their starters on either side of the football. There was no Lamar Jackson. There's no Odell Beckham. They got a lot of studs on defense as well. Who's that linebacker that they got? Roquan Smith, obviously, he didn't play. So Josh Johnson, former Buccaneer great, who's been around
2008 draft pick. Been on 14 teams or something like that.
He's been on a lot of teams. He sliced and diced that Bucs defense on the first drive, drove them all the way down the field. Bam, 7-0 Ravens. But then the Bucs kicked it into high gear on both sides of the football. Devin Tompkins, a great return to the 40-yard line. Then it was all letting Baker bake, finding Chris Godwin early and often, an end-around run to Cade Otton. Rashad White had some good runs in there as well. Then Baker went back to Chris Godwin a couple of times. I think maybe my favorite play was the swing pass to Kalen Geiger, where Devin Tompkins had a pancake block, knocking some guys out to open up some room for Kalen Geiger. And then Baker Mayfield hit a 10-yard touchdown pass to Chris Godwin. And then Kyle Trask came in after. But your initial thoughts with the starters, Adam, how everything looked with Baker in the game and a lot of starters getting some action for the first time.
Yeah, so my first impression was that in the first quarter, the passing was really on point. As you alluded to, Baker Mayfield going 6 for 6. Kyle Trask, on his first drive, he was very efficient, going 6 for 7. And in the first quarter as a whole, they were 12 for 13, 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it was really encouraging to see the offense being able to move the ball and score some touchdowns in this game and really firing on all cannons. So you had
You did that on purpose?
You mentioned the Cade Otton jet sweep play for 12 yards and just showing the creativity on offense. And then you had Rashad White having 7 carries for 39 yards. It looked like on every single running play, he was able to get like a second effort, a second wind, and being able to fight for an extra yard or two. So just really impressive to see the offense. Also, Tristan Wirfs was out there at left tackle. It was encouraging to see him out there as well. And he really looks like a natural there. Baker Mayfield kind of alluded to it after the game during his press conference. but just really impressive from all of those guys. And that's not to mention the big play that Trey Palmer had.
Oh my God. He essentially, I think he should have got like an interception statistic for that. Because he it didn't look like the ball was intended for Trey Palmer, but he went up, snatched it, made another big play, had a nice punt return.
His legs weren't even on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. Scott Reynolds is about to join us. But before Scott comes on, let's talk about Scott's favorite energy drink and our favorite energy drink as well. Celsius Energy Drinks, the official sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. So many awesome, delicious flavors that you can try. The newest one is the sparkling fruit punch, the Cosmic Vibe. Can't go wrong with the lemon lime or the orange either, or the strawberry lemonade. No sugar, no post-energy drink crash or jitters that you might get with another product out there. So go to the Celsius store locator, punch in your address, and it'll tell you the closest location to pick up a Celsius energy drink at your local convenience store, health and wellness store, or your bodega. And then if you want to start getting it in bulk, go over to Amazon, click on the subscribe and save. You could have Celsius sent to your residence really whenever you want. I'd recommend getting that variety pack so you can have it sent every week, month, quarterly, yearly. Get that variety pack, because variety is the spice of life, as you see all the different flavors on the screen. Just make sure you're drinking Celsius energy drinks. Make Celsius your number one pick. Celsius, the official sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. All right, joining us live from Raymond James Stadium is SR Scott Reynolds. There's no other way to sugarcoat it. Biggest news of the evening, obviously, was Jason Licht announcing live during the WFLA broadcast that Ryan Jensen is going on IR and is out for the season. Just your initial reactions, and then obviously you were at the press conference with Todd Bowles and Ryan Jensen where he did speak. So lay it on us, Scott.
Well, it certainly was disappointing news, right? It's something, Matt, that we've kind of hinted at for a while. I think we've said on a podcast or two last week. Sometimes it's not what we're told. Sometimes it's what we're not told, right? And we've been probing our sources about Ryan Jensen, and we've heard crickets. And sometimes no news is bad news. And I think that's what this was. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to go back and look and say, the last time he practiced was before the preseason opener against the Steelers, and he has not practiced since then. He didn't have a setback, but he certainly didn't make any progress. And how Ryan Jensen characterized it was when he was doing all of the workouts leading up to football practice, to training camp, he was not having any pain per se. There was some soreness, but once he started doing those football drills, and even though he was practicing one day and taking a day off, he was feeling some pain. It was different from soreness. It was pain. And he didn't come out and say it tonight. He was asked about it, if he regrets not doing surgery, and he said no. And the thing is, the ligaments are fine. So when you have surgery, right, that's to repair ligament damage. And in hindsight, he didn't need that. But the real kicker, he's had cartilage damage. Cartilage, once you lose it, it's gone, right? There's no replacing that. And when you get the bone on bone, that's where the pain comes from. Mm-hmm. When you don't have that cartilage in your knee, supporting your knee, I'm afraid that Ryan Jensen has played his last down, not just in Tampa Bay, but in the NFL. He's 32 years old. I don't see him making a comeback. Certainly hope that he does, but this is not going to get better. When you don't have the necessary cartilage, when you have cartilage in there, it's just not good. And he's not 23, he's 32, right? Those numbers are kind of juxtaposed in the wrong way for Ryan Jensen, unfortunately.
It's sad when it happens like in the NBA when you're a Knicks fan, Matt. Derrick Rose, when he had the torn ACL with the Chicago Bulls, he was a young point guard in his early 20s. Ryan Jensen, he's an offensive lineman in his early 30s. Derrick Rose wasn't able to get back to form. It doesn't look likely that Ryan Jensen will either.
Yeah, and I think what really was most telling, I mean, there's a lot of things that were telling, and obviously you could hear it in Jensen's voice. He wasn't, straight up shedding tears like he kind of was in his first press conference, but you could hear it in his voice. Obviously, this is affecting him in a very serious way, understandably so. This is his career. This is his livelihood. And, he kept saying he's going to fight his butt off to get back. And the thing that really stood out to me was when he said, yeah, if we tried to do surgery, it would actually make it worse. And I'm thinking, listen, I'm not a medical expert, but typically when you get surgery, it's to make something better and to improve your quality of life, whether it's your knee or whatever body part. And the fact that his knee is just so affected in a way that where surgery would make it worse. Like you never really hear anything like that. And Scott, where the Bucs, I think, are screwed more than anything else. One, not having Ryan Jensen, who's one of the best centers when he's fully healthy, but contractually, I mean, they have him for next season too, and they're already paying the Tom Brady tax. Now they're putting a lot, and there's nothing they can do about it, but there's a lot of money going to Ryan Jensen without getting his services in it either. So the Bucs financially are in a very tough spot too.
Yeah, I got to think because of the mutual respect between Ryan Jensen and Jason Licht, I almost think, and this is just my speculation, but it's informed in speculation only because I've been covering this team and this league for almost 3 decades. It's not informed speculation in that I've heard this from any team source, but my guess is that they put Jensen on IR. That's what they're going to do, obviously.
Yeah. He's
going to get paid this year, every penny, because he's entitled to it, right?
Yep.
And then I think that they come to an agreement next year and say, Ryan, look, you're 33 now. The knee's not going to come back. You're going to retire, and we need to recoup some cap savings, right? Like you've gotten paid 2 years to play 1 playoff game.
Yeah.
Right. And we feel that's fair. Now help the team out and see if we can come to some type of injury settlement or some type of agreement to lower the cap hit that they were going to have to take on, or I should say that they're slated to take on right now for next year. So that's what I envision happening just because of this. And if Ryan Jensen does retire, then we just saw with Corey Davis, teams are able to recover some cap room. Yeah. I think that's what's in the works here. And even though Ryan Jensen was asked if playing last year, or I should say earlier this year in January, in that playoff game against the Cowboys, if that was detrimental to his recovery, because remember, he was practicing for several days, right, to be able to be medically cleared to play in that game, right? So what happened there, right? Because he was apparently further ahead there. If he's able to play in a game, that was more progress than he has had now in training camp, where he has not put 2 days together in terms of practice. So he said that no, that game wasn't detrimental to his knee. I'm not inclined to believe him, and I'm not saying that he's lying, but I think that he doesn't want to blame his desire to play in that game with Tom Brady and help the team out. I don't think he wants to put the blame on that. But the reality of it is the question he was asked, his last question in the press conference was, well, why go on injured reserve for the entire year? Why not go on injured reserve and then have a chance to come back later this year? And what he said was, and it was kind of contradictory to what he said earlier, which is, well, the fear is that if I rush coming back, that it ends up being detrimental. And you know what? That's exactly what happened. That's what happened back in January. And, who knows? You can't go back in time. There's no time machine. We don't know if Ryan Jensen would have missed that game, if he would have been better off from a recovery standpoint, or if he gets to camp and he still has these problems. We just don't know. And we're never going to know. But it just seems to me that playing in that game in Dallas certainly didn't help him out for where we are now.
Right. And I can't blame a guy for, wearing his heart on his sleeve and wanting to play in a big game. It's the playoffs. You're trying to come back. So it's unfortunate that it happened, but man, let me tell you, if Jason Licht, Todd Bowles, and Ryan Jensen ever committed a crime together or try to take on a heist or something, they would all end up going to jail because none of their stories are on the same page. Jason Light's in the booth being like, yeah, we knew about this for weeks. We're making it public now. And then Todd Bowles, right up at the podium, gets asked about it and is like, yeah, we didn't make this decision until yesterday or the day before, whatever. So clearly not all the stories are lining up, and everything you just said about Ryan Jensen being a little contradictory about timetables and things of that nature.
And you know what? And here's the thing. So Tristan Wirfs, who did our training camp diary, I asked him a couple times about Ryan Jensen, and quite frankly, Tristan Wirfs was telling some white lies, and he admitted it. He said it's kind of been hard to keep it a secret because the diagnosis was not good. And I think everybody in the building, right? They wanted Ryan Jensen to come back. That's the thing. It's like their fibs are well-intentioned, right?
Yes.
They wanted him to come back. They were hopeful. Well, maybe, you don't take him to New York and maybe the knee feels better and you test it and all of a sudden, okay, maybe you've taken a step forward, and it just didn't happen, right? I think that's the unfortunate thing is there was a lot of hope, but the problem is hope's not a strategy, and you look at I think the salary cap number that Jensen carried, and people might say, well, Jason Licht didn't really prepare himself well for this type of scenario. Okay, well, the thing is you've got Robert Hainsey on the roster who started 17 games last year, plenty of experience. He's a bigger guy now. He's better heading into year 2. This is actually a better scheme fit for Robert Hainsey than the Byron Leftwich, Bruce Arians system.
Yeah.
Nick Leverett has some experience, although he has not looked as good as at center as I think he is at guard. You've got Chris Murray, who they might put on the practice squad as a developmental center. You've got John Molchin, who can do some snapping as well. It's not ideal, but it's not like Jason Licht could have gone out and got another starting caliber center, because you're still carrying that starter money for Ryan Jensen this year.
To me, the most telling thing was during the Jets joint practice that he didn't travel up there to go with the team. And would the Bucs really keep him on the active roster all season just for him to maybe play one playoff game this year if the Bucs were to make the playoffs? So it didn't make a lot of logistical sense. And I wonder if the Bucs are better off having an extra player on the 53-man roster instead of Jensen.
Yeah, I think so. And again, it kind of makes more sense too, because you're going to have to waive. And when I did the 53-man roster prediction, I forecasted Jensen going on injured reserve.
Yeah,
I thought that maybe they would keep him on the roster for roster cut down day, and then the next day put him on IR. Then you have the option to bring him back later in the year. This is obviously too severe, and they just want to do it now. And I think, to your point, Adam, it's when you look at their roster, moves here, you would have to cut a player that you have an intention of bringing back. And whenever you cut a player, you're risking losing that player getting picked up on waivers by some other team. So I think now it's kind of cut and dry. Hey, Jensen's going on IR. He's done for the year. And the 53 that we're going to keep, we don't have to worry about, the wink and the nod and the handshake and, hey, we're going to cut you, but we're going to bring you back when we put Jensen on IR. Now they just keep the 53 guys that they like, and then they get a chance to see the waiver wire. And if there's any other players out there that John Spytek and Rob McCartney and those guys in the pro department have scouted that they want to swap out a guy or two for, and we'll see. The roster is not going to be set with the 53. Right. They're going to make some adjustments to it.
Yeah, that's what I said the other day, Scott, on the show, that I think maybe not necessarily a starter, but there's going to be an offensive lineman on this roster that isn't currently in the organization. And I think
I agree
with Jensen, again, not the most shocking thing that he's going on IR because he hadn't practiced in weeks. So you kind of saw the light at the end of the tunnel. But we were also kind of tipped off to it the other day when Dave Canales spoke. And I asked him specifically about Cody Mauch and Luke Gedeke. And then he went on to talk about the rest of the offensive line. He's like, the right side, they're like my athletic guys. They're my movers. And then I have two giant guys on the left side.
Okay.
And then in the middle, Robert Hainsey's the brains. And I'm thinking, so what about Ryan Jensen? What's going on there? But moving forward with this offensive line, Jensen's on IR. He's not coming back. So eventually we're all going to have to move on with Ryan Jensen.
Yeah.
This depth scares me, Scott. It
Yeah.
really does after Robert Haynes. And we know what we're getting with Robert Hainsey. I think he was obviously very solid last season. But if something happens to him, like it did, going into the playoff game against the Cowboys, like, am I crazy for saying that John Molchen seems like the best option specifically at center for this offensive line? Because as you said with Nick Leverett, I think he's great as a guard, but I don't trust him at all as a center.
I agree. And the other thing, too, is John Molchen didn't play center tonight, or at least I didn't see him in the second half. I think they went with Neese instead. And the reason why I say that is because when this news dropped in the third quarter with Jason Licht telling WFLA, our partner in the official station of the Buccaneers, that Jensen was going in injured reserve, we're writing stories. We're kind of scrambling, and we're not paying as close of attention to part of the third and the fourth quarter collectively. I think you guys maybe probably were more than us, but we were writing stories, cropping pictures, making graphics, and doing everything for this podcast, and then putting up those stories. And hats off to Bailey Adams, knocking out just one, but two Ryan Jensen stories, J.C. Allen transcribing quotes from Jason Licht. It was a well-oiled machine here in the press box from the Pewter Report side. But I'm kind of with you, Matt. Based on what we've seen from John Molchen, I'm going to do some probing. I'm going to make some calls and send out some texts and see how they feel about John Molchen. But he's been around here enough, and he's a bigger guy. I like what I've seen so far. But, my name's not Harold Goodwin or Joe Gilbert. So, we'll see.
We do have a super chat, 1999. Thank you so much to Mopar Buck for the super chat. Mopar says, I'm late, but let's be honest, this isn't news. Jensen shouldn't even, he said there were typos in this. Jensen shouldn't even had his butt in that playoff game last season. Playoff game last season. Who naturally heals an injury like that? The Bucs organization handled this very poorly, in my opinion. I'm not a doctor, so I can't be like, oh, well, they should have done this instead of that, or he should have done 2 practices and then a day off or whatever. But they did take him along very, very slowly. And considering that he was back in January, and at the time he said that there was no setbacks at him, the fact that he was playing in that game and then it took him so slowly, that's where there's, I think, room for a little bit of criticism with this whole thing.
And I just wonder what the Bucs were exactly expecting with Ryan Jensen over the offseason, that he was just going to magically heal and be ready week 1, if they were hoping that he was going to maybe come along mid-season, or were they expecting him not to play at all? I think that's a big question mark in this whole thing, is what were they actually thinking Ryan Jensen was going to do on the field this season? Because
you know what?
I don't know.
That's a good question. I think that him playing in that playoff game against Dallas, I really believe that gave the Buccaneers a false sense of hope, to be perfectly candid. I think that they said, okay, you know what? He came back, he played. It was ugly, but he went out there and played the whole thing, wire to wire, didn't appear to get re-injured, right? And then, you sit there and think, okay, well, that's January. Golly, by July, August, he should be okay. And again, I think that they went into this, Jensen, Todd Bowles, Jason Licht, with the best intentions, with the most hopeful intentions. And again, keep in mind, I know that there's people out there criticizing Jason Licht, and I'm not necessarily here to defend Jason Licht. Probably should have, not been as hopeful. I will say this: Jason Licht and Ryan Jensen have got a rapport. This is one of the best free agent signings, the healthy version of Ryan Jensen, the guy that helped the Bucs win the Super Bowl, the guy that made the Pro Bowl. That version of Ryan Jensen is one of Jason Licht's better signings, right? He was essentially a backup in Baltimore, and he took a chance and made this guy the highest paid center in the league. And Ryan Jensen, after the first year in Tampa, which he would admit was underwhelming, picked it up, got in really good shape, and was literally one of the best centers in the league for the span of about 3 years until this injury. So I think they went into it with the best of intentions. I do think there was a bit of a false hope in the fact that he played in that playoff game, gave them a bit of false sense of security. And again, the Buccaneers were handicapped this offseason with the salary cap. You're paying Ryan Jensen. If you cut Ryan Jensen, you take a massive cap hit. So, and you can't cut a player who's injured, because then you get, hit by grievance from the league. And again, they're hopeful that he comes back. So you've got, you have a guy you're paying starter money. You have a guy in Robert Hainsey who's on a rookie contract. Good, that helps you out financially. He's got 17 games under his belt. They weren't planning for this to happen. They weren't thinking this was going to happen. I think they were living in hope. And again, hope is great, but it's not a strategy. And it came back to bite him. And sometimes you roll the dice and you don't win. And I think this is one of those things. And thankfully they've got a better version of Robert Hainsey. He's not as good as Ryan Jensen is, but I think he's going to be a better version of what we saw from Robert Hainsey last year. And I think this is a better scheme fit. Even Ryan Jensen said that, and we'll see how he does. But then again, as you've said, as James Hill wrote for Pewter Report today, the O-line depth, it's a little scary along the offensive line.
Yeah, it's a little thin at the moment. And I understand there's a lot of people in the chat that are unhappy with Jason Licht and the building the offensive line specifically with the depth. And by the way, thank you so much to John 407 for the $9.99 super chat that says, love the show, especially this past live draft coverage. John, thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And thank you for the super chat. But the last thing I'll say about Licht building depth for the team and the offensive line, yes, it could be better. But, they drafted Luke Edeke last season. They drafted Cody Mauch this year. It's not for a lack of effort. He keeps going after offensive linemen every single year. And let's also remember.
And Robert Hainsey before that, Matt, you're right.
And Robert Hainsey before that. And let's also remember Ali Marpet retiring 2 seasons ago was a huge thing that no one saw coming at the time.
That's a curveball. He was only 29?
Exactly. A huge curveball, was still under contract. So then he had to go and trade for Shaq Mason, and now he's not with the team anymore. So we had to address another position that, he could have been like, oh, we're fine. We got Ali Marpet. He's one of the best offensive linemen in the league. So that really set the depth and the offensive line in general back a little bit when Ali Marpet retired. It kind of, maybe not necessarily a butterfly effect, but it changed a lot of things. But to say that, if you want to say that the offensive line depth is not that good, I would agree with you. But to say that he didn't try to address it, I think is not exactly fair, because they did it with Edeke and Robert Hainsey. And they did it
the trade, like you said.
And the trade. And they did it with Hainsey specifically when their offensive line was set intact, and maybe they didn't even necessarily need another offensive lineman at the time.
Right.
But good thing that they did draft Robert Hainsey, because now he's super, super important to this offensive line. And I'm sure he'll draft another offensive lineman next season. So I go back to something that Todd Bowles said, I think last year too. He was talking a little bit more about tackles, but I think it goes for the entire offensive line.
Yeah.
It's tough to find the backup offensive tackles that become available, because when you have a good offensive lineman, you hold on to that guy. You either make him a starter or you sign him to a long-term contract.
Yeah.
You can get away with cutting a running back and, let's pick up this running back. Maybe he'll do something for us. It doesn't happen with offensive linemen, because we all understand that the trenches, offensive and defensive line, are the two most important, and quarterback, obviously, but they're the most important things to a successful football team. So I just wanted to address that. Mopar with another super chat. Thank you so much. Says, our O-line depth is tied up in a horrible Gage contract.
Yeah, and I'll say this again. Jason Licht makes mistakes. Every general manager does, and without a direct quote, I can tell you, Jason Licht's learned his lesson when it comes to the Russell Gage contract. You will see more one-year prove-it deals, and going forward, they've worked out well. Shaq Barrett comes to mind, et cetera, and even Leonard Fournette is another one that worked out well, these one-year prove-it deals. And we might see that this year with Ryan Neal. That's certainly the hope in the secondary, right?
Yeah.
They learned their lesson. You're going to see more one-year deals. If you want to play for us, you're going to play for 1 year. We'll see how you do. That was a bit of a gamble, and it certainly hasn't paid off with Gage's performance and with his injuries, right? That's a lot of money, $10 million. And granted, he took a pay cut this year, but lesson learned, that's not going to happen again. I think the only players that are really going to get paid now, if another Tom Brady comes out there, right, you're going to pay him because he's a proven guy in this league, right? But the proven guys here, Antoine Winfield, Tristan Wirfs, those are the guys that are going to get the big money long-term contract extensions. The Buccaneers, who have been here, done that, and proven it within this organization for multiple years. And so I think I hear you. And you know who else would agree with you? Jason Licht would agree with you about the Russell Gage contract. If he could get out of it right now, he would. They tried. They got the pay cut. He ended up getting hurt. And I think we've probably seen Russell Gage, play his last down in Tampa as well.
The Bucs
go ahead. I was just going to say, hindsight is 2020 with the Gage contract, but it was also at a time when wide receivers were getting a lot of money when they were signing all these big contract extensions. So Jason Licht, he went out there, got a bargain signing to replace Antonio Brown, someone who had production with the Falcons. It just ended up not working out, and injuries are more to blame. If Russell Gage was on the field last season or even this year, having more opportunity, you would have saw a different Russell Gage.
Yeah, and that's well said, Adam. And the other caveat we need to point out is he got Russell Gage for Tom Brady. And you mentioned it. That was to replace Antonio Brown. They probably don't make that move. They probably don't go out there and give Russell Gage a 3-year, $30 million contract, $10 million a year, if it's Baker Mayfield, right? Or if it's Kyle Trask. The fact that it was Tom Brady, it was the last push, the last salvo. They saw what happened when AB wasn't in the playoffs. It was Mike and Chris, and they needed another wide receiver, and I think they kind of force-fed that for Tom Brady. It didn't work out.
Bucs were already underdogs before the injuries, and now with their latest injuries to Russell Gage and Ryan Jensen, they're probably even more underdogs now. But of course, Underdog is fun to play if you go to Underdog Fantasy. Their Best Ball Mania is coming up soon. One of the funnest tournaments that you can do, a ton of prize money. The cool thing is you just draft your team. There's a buy-in, $15 million in total prizes. But when you draft your team, you just set it and forget it. As you see on the screen, no trades, no waivers. You don't have to worry about different bye weeks and things like that. It just accumulates the best scores from your top players each week, which is super fun because, Pewter people are busy. You got a lot going on. You're focused on the Bucs, but you can't draft every single Bucs player for this Best Ball Mania. Maybe you can, but, other people want Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So Underdog Fantasy, use that promo code Pewter. $15 million in total prizes, $3 million to the first place winner in Underdog Fantasy for Best Ball Mania. But you could do a lot of different leagues as well. Pewter Report is going to be having some leagues coming up soon. If you want to play against us, you can email us individually. Scott is sr@pewterreport.com. I'm saying this out loud for people listening to the audio version. I'm Matt at pewterreport.com. Josh Capo is josh.capo, Queipo @gmail.com. Bailey Adams is BaileyJAdams22 @gmail.com. You can email Adam as well. Adam, you want to pitch your email real quick?
Yeah, it is Adam, LIVSON01 @gmail.com.
Cool. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Adam lives on. It's like a little play in your last name, Adam Slavon. I love it.
Yeah. There you go. So if you want to play against us, we'll be starting up leagues next week. You can also do over-unders, a lot of different fun events that you could do with Underdog Fantasy. So use that promo code Pewter, get a bonus when you sign up with UnderdogFantasy.com. Let's talk a little bit about the game itself. We could stick with the offensive line, and on Monday's show, we'll talk a lot about the starters as well. But the offensive line, with all the worries that we've had about them even before Ryan Jensen, Tristan Wirfs at left tackle, that Tyler playing for the first time.
Oh, man.
Mean, that line was getting a good. Let's stick with the one asterisk of it was the Ravens' backups. We didn't see all the starters for the Ravens, but the offensive line, looked really, really, really good tonight.
Yeah, for real. Tristan Wirfs was moving bodies, man. I mean, what's the song? When the bodies hit the floor.
Bodies hit the floor. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Tristan Wirfs was just paving the way. If I'm Rashad White,
you're running that way.
I grew up when I was a little kid watching the Washington Redskins, right? And John Riggins was my favorite player, and he would just look for Route 66, and that was Joe Jacoby, the offensive tackle for the Redskins back then. Number 66. You just call him Route 66. I'm going to follow Route 66 and hit it. And I'm just saying, it's all Rashad White has to do is follow Route 78. Just find where that guy is and run that way, because Tristan Wirfs had some amazing combo blocks in this game and was just moving bodies. And Matt Filer, it just makes a nice, big, massive 1-2 punch there on that side.
Yeah.
Really liked the way that Rachaad White ran the ball tonight. I asked Baker Mayfield about Wirfs and about Rachaad White. And the thing about White that he really liked is he's such a good tempo runner that he's kind of a slippery back, and
slippery
really,
was I don't mean to cut you off, but slippery was the exact word I had in my mind.
No doubt. And that's exactly what he is he knows when to mash the gas. He does a good job of finding the hole. He's big enough, guys, where he can push the pile and get that extra yard or two. He can turn a 2-yard run into a 4-yard run, a 7-yard run into a 9-yard run.
And he was doing that.
And he was doing that. Exactly, Adam. He was doing that.
Yeah, well, your thoughts about the offensive line and the run game, because it looked new and improved from Adam, you and I were sitting in MetLife Stadium during that game against the Jets where it was negative loss, 2-yard run, negative loss. A night and day difference between that game last week and then getting the starters for this one. Even Keyshawn Vaughn looked a little bit better. Not fantastic, but at least improved.
He had 4.3 yards a carry, which you would take that any day of the week. And then you had Sean Tucker, again, kind of showing that elusiveness. In my opinion, I think he should be running back number 2 over somebody like Vaughn and even Edmonds. But overall, all the running backs that came into the game played well. Ronnie Brown towards the end of the game had an 8-yard rush. And then Patrick Laird, he decided to try to do a hurdle in Antonio Brown fashion and gain 21 yards. But just for the running game, a lot more creative. It looks like the running backs, they play a lot smoother within the scheme. And the offensive line was a big part of that. I think the tackles played really well besides Tristan Wirfs. Justin School is somebody the Jets reporters were kind of talking about during joint practice. I mean, he's 6'7", tied for the tallest player on the team with Charles Snowden, and he might be the best option at swing tackle.
Yeah. And the thing, too, is when you look at Rachaad White, because he's the starter, right? 7 carries, a 5.8-yard average tonight. And the Buccaneers as a whole, granted, it wasn't all the starters, but 158 yards rushing, right? I mean, it's been a minute since the Buccaneers have had that type of run game. And granted, it was against some backup players and it was with some backup players. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. But you look at what Rachaad White did with that starting offensive line, and that certainly gives you hope. And I'll tell you what, guys, did you notice any bad play calls tonight? Did you notice any befuddling moments, right? I mean, we've all seen that. We know what that looks like after watching Byron Leftwich, especially last year. We know what bad play calls look like. I thought this was a masterful game from Dave Canales.
Tallying down all the first down runs up the middle like last season.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, and listen, there are going to be some games where it doesn't go Dave Canales' way. There are going to be some defensive coordinators that really are winning that chess match, right? Because Canales, he is what he is. He's a first-time play caller. There's going to be some ugly moments. There's going to be some games where it doesn't work. The yardage isn't going to be there. The points are going to be there. But boy, tonight it just seemed like he was an orchestra conductor and everything was in tune, whether it was Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask. And the only fault I have with Trask is he just missed some throws. Yeah. I mean, the receivers were open, right? The scheme was there. The play call was there. I think Trask made some throws early, and then he had some that just kind of got away from him, right? Good news is no interceptions, no real dangerous throws. I think maybe the most dangerous throw he made ended up being a Trey Palmer highlight. Yeah. But I'm looking at this game and I'm I wasn't even thinking that Dave Canales, this was his third game calling plays. So I was just really impressed with how it all came together. There was, a 3-and-out to start, but boy, that second drive picked things up. And from there, it just seemed like the Bucs didn't have any problems really moving the football.
First of all, just want to give a shout out to Trustin Vorbeck. Thank you so much for the $19.99 super chat. Trustin says, just want to say, love you guys. We love you too, Trustin. Thank you so much for that. You. I mean, the first thing that stood out to me, creativity. There was a 12-yard run, not by Rachaad White, not by Sean Tucker, Not even by, I don't know, a speedy wide receiver, by tight end Cade Otton. If that doesn't scream creativity, I don't know what does. But Scott, that does go to your point of sometimes things won't go Canales' way. That play did. But say that gets blown up immediately, everyone's going, what are you doing? Running with Cade Otton? He's the slowest guy on offense. What are you doing here? But Mopar Bug with another super chat. Mopar, you are the MVP of tonight's broadcast.
He's going to get a game ball tonight.
Yeah. Mopar says it's early, but the Skip Pete signing is seeming to pay off. I'd expect a boost in the run game with him being on the coaching staff. I think people forgot about him being brought here.
That's a great point. Said. I mean, going from like Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard last year, both of them combined had 0 fumbles, and then coming over here and kind of implementing and kind of showing these young Bucs running backs the ropes, I think has been really beneficial and probably more under the radar than people will seem to think.
That's a great point, Adam. And speaking of game balls, we're going to give a game ball to Mopar Bucs for that for sure. I mean, that's fantastic. But when it comes to the players, I think it's time for some game balls, fellas, presented by Manscaped. Your balls will thank you. So, all right, here is the infamous Manscaped read. Let's do it. Attention, fantasy football fanatics, as draft season approaches, don't neglect the most important draft pick of all, your game balls. We all know how injuries can ruin a season, so let Manscaped take care of that Reggie Bush of yours with the skin-safe technology. This should guarantee you have a smooth ride into the playoffs. The leaders in below-the-waist grooming have created this championship lineup with their Performance Package 4.0, and it's time for you to do the same. Join the 9 million men, including myself, worldwide, who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the promo code Pewter. That's right, Pewter. Actually, it's Pewter 20. I take that back. Make sure you use Pewter 20 because that's where you're going to get the 20% off plus the free shipping. So let me continue. Inside the Performance Package 4.0, you're going to find the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, the Crop Preserver ball deodorant, the Crop Reviver toner, the Performance Boxer Briefs in a travel bag. Slotted quarterback, you've got the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. The spaceship here is here to guide you on your journey to trim your body, your balls, and even your A-gap. This 4th-generation trimmer also features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 has a 7,000 RPM motor. Sounds scary, but it's not. A new multi-function on and off switch, which can engage a travel lock, and it's even waterproof. Folks, get 20% off plus free shipping. Use the promo code Pewter20 at manscaped.com. It's 20% off plus free shipping with the promo code Pewter20 at Manscaped. It's time to put the PP in PPR and get a grip on your pigskin this season with Manscaped. All right, fellas, it is time for the game balls. So let's go ahead and dish some of those out, shall we? Adam, let's start with you. Who is your game ball going to tonight?
I would say J.J. Russell. If we were going to talk about the defense a little bit here, J.J. Russell led the team with 11 tackles tonight, so he would get my pick. Todd Bowles said after the game that he really led the defense throughout the game, and I thought he did really well.
Yeah. He's one of the most improved players this preseason, right? He had that interception that you see there on your screen against Pittsburgh. He forced a fumble. You guys were there to see it against the Jets, and then 11 tackles tonight. He was really calling the defense because they didn't have Servassier Dennis tonight. They didn't have KJ Britt, and they held Levante David out. So it was really Ulysses Gilbert and JJ Russell. Russell went wire to wire, right? Because then you had Devin White for a little bit at the beginning. But Russell, I agree, Adam. Well said. He had a great game. I think he's probably the most improved defensive player on this team from a year ago. Matt, let's get your game ball tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction. Player everyone knows very well. Chris Godwin, first time getting to play, made multiple receptions, had the touchdown on the throw from Baker Mayfield. It was just vintage Chris Godwin. I mean, he's lining up on the outside now, so we saw him in some situations where, just beat your guy. Doesn't have to be the craziest of routes. Baker just hit him, bam, first down. We saw him break some tackles as well, and then he did his thing in the end zone. A lot of focus has been on Mike Evans this summer, understandably so, but Chris Godwin looked like he's in for a great season with what he did tonight.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with either of those guys. I mean, when Godwin came in, he was just a ball magnet, right? A pun intended, I guess. But yeah, he was just catching everything thrown his way by Baker Mayfield. So my game ball is going to Baker Mayfield. I mean, when you're perfect and you throw a touchdown pass, you know, and you've only had one incompletion and 2 touchdowns and no interceptions in the preseason, that's pretty good stat line. It really is. So Baker Mayfield just looks comfortable operating in this system. He and Dave Canales already seem to just be on the same wavelength. And guys, we've seen it out in training camp. And this is no knock on Kyle Trask, but just to see how much Baker Mayfield is connected to the hip with Dave Canales. I mean, we have dozens and dozens of pictures of Baker Mayfield talking to Dave Canales from our photographer, Cliff Welch. That's not by accident. Common occurrence when they walked off the field together here after the Pittsburgh game. I mean, it was Baker Mayfield talking with Dave Canales. They have a rapport. They have a bond. This offense seems to fit Baker Mayfield. We'll see how the season progresses, but so far so good for Baker Mayfield in this offense.
Yeah, I think they're going to have a lot of fireside chats throughout the season, just the two of them, which will be great. I mean, open communication and dialogue usually is helpful in really any area. Before we wrap up the show, we got a couple of super chats to get to. Tree, parentheses, Ken, thank you for the $20 Canadian super chat. Says, second, Pewter Report, thanks for what you do. You guys are absolutely killing it this year. It's great to finally have rock-solid coverage of our Buccaneers team. #GoBucs. Tree, we appreciate that so much.
That means a lot. Thank you. Yeah.
And Trustin with another one, $4.99, says, do you think Rachaad White can make a top 10 finish over 1,200 yards? I'll answer this first real quick. Can he be a top 10 rusher? Yeah, absolutely. I think with the Bucs emphasis on running the football. 1,200 though, I just think the rotation of running backs that they have and the uncertainty with the depth of the offensive line, I think 1,200 might be a little bit steep. They haven't even had a 1,000-yard rusher in a while. Yeah,
you know, Adam, I want to get your thoughts on this. To me, if you look at running backs that have 1,200 yards or more rushing, it means one thing: they're on a winning team. Because in the fourth quarter, they're running the ball, they're salting away some of those games. That's where you see a running back that might have 70, 80 yards through the first 3 quarters, end up with 110, end up with 120 yards rushing, because they're really force feeding that back the ball. And I think that's going to be key for Rachaad White. Maybe, I think he gets to 1,000, but is he going to get to 1,200 or so? That's going to depend on if the Buccaneers are winning games. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that he would be a 1,000-yard rusher. Based on the running back rotation last year, I think Leonard Fournette had 189 carries. White had 129. In a more realistic sense, you could see White maybe getting 200, 225, and maybe breaking that threshold. And then Sean Tucker, he might be eating into those carries by the end of the season. But you mentioned running backs kind of controlling and dictating the clock. I mean, you've seen that for years with Derrick Henry on the Titans, Nick Chubb on the Browns. With the Bucs' emphasis on running the ball, the biggest factor will be, are they actually leading the game, and can they control the clock instead of fighting from down a couple scores?
Yeah. Well, tomorrow not tomorrow. Tomorrow's Sunday. Here I'm already excited about Monday's podcast. I want it to be tomorrow, but tomorrow is Sunday, not Monday. So Monday, we're going to have at 4:20, we're going to have a roll call, which is going to be fun. We're going to be talking more about how the starters shine versus the Ravens, talking about Rachaad White in this running game. And we have tons of coverage from tonight's game tonight, as well as tomorrow on PewterReport.com, the mothership. So make sure that you're tuning into PewterReport.com. You can follow us on social media on X, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads at Pewter Report. And then our YouTube channel, make sure you're subscribing. We're almost at 11,500 subscribers. Thanks to you, Pewter people. That's Pewter Report TV. And we greatly appreciate all the support from you, Pewter people. It's why we do this. We love you guys. We love the feedback, the interaction, and the videos. We're going to keep cranking them out for you guys.
Yes, we will. So that's going to do it for us on tonight's show. For Adam Slavon, for Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you on Monday for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out. Chris Nizian, good night, too. Forced a fumble. Did he win slot corner? We'll find out.